We are in the 25th year of the 21st century, yet today we celebrate the life of a church member who was born at the dawn of the 20th century, Mrs. Gladys Owens. There are approximately 101,000 centenarians living in the United States. Hillcrest Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is located at 2010 25th Avenue North in Nashville, Tennessee, is proud to announce that one of these wonderful people is a beloved member of our Hillcrest family. We are celebrating her life, which began on January 22nd, 1921. Mrs. Owens is living the good life in her family home, which her father purchased when she was around 8 years of age. She loves the Lord and gives our Heavenly Father full credit for blessing her with good health, sound mind, and an exuberant spirit. Let's review some amazing facts that Mrs. Owens has witnessed over her 104 years as a resident of our earthly home. Mrs. Owens was born 8 years before a time in our history known as the Great Depression. She entered the world under the rise of Jim Crow laws and the unfair trappings of discrimination and segregation. Mrs. Owens saw the effects of World War II, the Holocaust, as well as the unfair internment of Japanese Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Let's begin with the entry of Mrs. Owens into the Adventist faith. Mrs. Owens' mother, Gladys Rucker, heard the message of Seventh-day Adventism and became a staunch member of the faith. She required that her 4 children follow the teachings of the church. Her mother also believed that whatever the church taught was gospel. She even limited the time that her children could spend with other family members because no one else in her mother's family had joined the church. In 1934, a young Gladys Rucker was baptized by Charles M. Kinney at the Adventist Church on Harding Street here in Nashville. She recalls that Kinney was so frail that he almost caused her to drown. Kinney was an elder who was a pivotal force in the establishment of Seventh-day Adventist churches in the South. He was also a historical significance to the history of Hillcrest. It is documented within church records that young Gladys Rucker Owens saw and experienced the Seventh-day Adventist Church grow from its infancy in the segregated South to the dynamic pillar of influence across the global community. Now let's review some of the innovations that Mrs. Owens has witnessed over the 20th and 21st centuries. Sister Owens was 2 years old when Clarence Birdseye introduced frozen food, which totally transformed the food industry. During the 1930s, the helicopter and the walkie-talkie were born. In 1940, Frederick McKinley Jones introduced his refrigerated trucks that delivered produce safely to local stores. During the 1950s, Lewis Howard Latimer helped the hygiene and restroom needs of passengers on railroad cars by creating onboard bathrooms. Marie Van Britten Brown came along in the 1960s and developed the first home security system, which included peepholes, cameras, and a two-way communication system that laid the groundwork for today's security programs. Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, who earned her PhD at MIT, developed key technologies, such as caller ID and call waiting. The 1980s saw Mark Dean create the first color monitors for IBM. Mae Jemison became the first African-American woman to fly into space aboard the Space Shuttle in 1992, while Stephanie Wilson followed right behind Mae in 2010. Dr. Joy Buolamwini is currently leading research on algorithmic, bias, and facial recognition technology. As we conclude this second video on the innovations that have been developed during the lifetime of Mrs. Owens, let's remember that Mrs. Owens has lived in the United States under the leadership of 18 presidents, including America's first African-American president, Barack Obama, and America's first African-American/Asian and female vice president, Kamala Harris. What an extraordinary and profound life, Sister Owens. Today we want you to know how much you are loved. We salute you and wish you many more happy birthdays.